Welcome, one and all, to the 13th episode of the No Name Cinema Society. Who can believe that we've made it for 13 episodes? My word. It's craziness. Hi, I'm Jonathan Betzler. I'm your host for the evening. We were scheduled to go earlier, I guess 6 days ago, on the 14th, and we got stopped by a virus. Not necessarily a virus of the health kind, of the human kind. It was a computer virus that shut us down literally minutes before broadcast. So I assume you're here tonight to watch us talk about the movie Minions. And in the movie Minions, you met Stuart, Kevin, and Bob. So meet my Minions. J Money here in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, I should say, and Drunk Davie in Charlotte, North Carolina this week. Davie, you got the Bud Light going, is that right?
I do.
And you got wine, J Money?
What's that? Oh no, I'm joining you guys with beer as well. Covering the liver.
Oh, what kind of beer do you have?
I've got a Founders.
Interesting. Okie dokie. So anyway, I've got the shock top rolling here. So and I actually specifically got some of the yellow in related to Minions. Now we're a little late in this movie. It was opened on the 10th, but Minions fever was gripping Los Angeles, as you can see from this photo. This is the famous ArcLight Cinemarama Dome. I don't know if Davey Joe's seen this before. Covered in crawling Minions. That's Stuart and Kevin and Bob. I mean, like, this is from the street level, if you can only imagine how tall that is. So this is a kind of a big movie that we're reviewing this week. You guys excited? J Money, why don't you tell us about the plot a little bit?
Sure, a little bit. Well, just briefly, okay. Minions, the movie, is a prequel of sorts. It tells the origin story of the Minions themselves, a.k.a. the short, yellow, pillow-shaped henchmen from the Despicable Me franchise. And it's about their search after thousands of years to find their one true master, who ultimately would lead them through their greatest caper and to the one thing that they really want the most, which is an evil boss to serve.
Cool. I like the use of the phrase pillow shaped. Davey Joe, opening thoughts.
I thought it was a good cartoon. I think that's the best way for me to describe this movie. It's definitely a cartoon.
And now, how would you distinguish cartoon from animated film? Is that what?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You don't see a lot of. I thought the story was kind of one-dimensional, kind of flat. There wasn't a lot of character development, I don't think. But
okay.
To criticize it that way would be like to say that Elmer Fudd didn't really come across. I didn't see him get from A to B. I mean, it's.
I opened a can of worms. We can get more into that later. I didn't realize it'd be a can of worms. I was just sort of curious the distinction. No, I mean, like, it's a good conversation, but I'm betraying the concept of what's supposed to be opening thoughts. J Money.
I thought it was fine.
Do you notice how J Money's opening thoughts after I scolded him after one episode have gotten more and more succinct?
If I can nail it in one word, I will try to do that.
Well, that's your challenge for next week. I'd like to keep it to a sentence or two. My pen dropped. But, I mean, I think, similar to, we talked about the movie Home in episode 6, and similar to that, the Minions, at least in the first Despicable Me, felt like an Ewoks-like effort towards merchandising, and in a smarter way than the way that they did it in Home with DreamWorks, by sort of building the Minions craze and culminating in this film and successfully. But beyond that, I feel like there's not much to there's not much depth, or I mean, certainly there's a ton more better animated films or cartoons. So I cut you off earlier, Davey Joe. So why don't you finish what you're saying about how you distinguish between Minions and animated films?
I mean,
this feels like a notch below because it was not as smart or not as clever, or what are you thinking there?
Well, I don't know. I don't. It didn't feel like, to me, it was. It didn't feel like a drama or anything like that, like a kind of like an Up or a Toy Story or anything like that. And it was just kind of like a journey and it was silly, and it was funny, and that's fine. I enjoyed it, but I mean, it's not something that sticks with me. In fact, I'm having a hard time kind of remembering it now.
And I mean, it hasn't been like we've gone months. We've gone a full month without, between seeing a film and then reviewing it. So it's not just that it's been probably 10 days since you've seen it, at maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah, something like that. 10, I think.
So interestingly enough, some of the positives I wanna bestow upon it. One, I in the first 2 Despicable Me films, they were sort of interchangeable to me. What I like about this particular film is that I do like that they assigned some personalities to them. Like, I was having a hard time understanding in the first 2 films why everyone liked them so much when they were just like, like they had some differences in how they looked a little bit, but nothing really too distinguishable about them. These 3 main minions that the film follows, are actual characters, and I like that I was able to follow that, and I was more interested in that than I was in the first 2 Despicable Me films, or at least in that part of the Despicable Me films. The other part I liked about the film was the intertextuality about it, like all the references. I mean, I sort of like historical fiction in general, and I feel like there was a lot of, references to Comic-Con and things like that. The film, similar to, we talked about the references like in Tomorrowland, there was a lot of that, little Easter eggs hidden throughout the film. Like, for example, Gru's mother being part of the Comic-Con, the Villain Con thing. Lots of little things, not just references to the other Despicable Me films, references to 60s pop culture and so forth and so on, which I thought were fun and cute. J Money, what's some of the positives that you took away?
Some of the positives. Well, let me think here, because really I easily start with the negatives. I know.
That's why I'm trying to force, because I know that's a longer thing, so I'm trying to force us to start with the positives.
Well, you guys are talking on these things that I was getting myself queued up to say something in regards to that stuff. But I think, just stepping back, I mean, fine. I said it was fine because ultimately I do think the movie is, fine. I think it's light enough and fluffy enough that regardless of what I thought about its success in terms of a script or in terms of a storyline, it was amusing enough to people that were probably the better target audience for it. The kids in my theater definitely seemed to respond to it well. And in a lot of ways, I think the Minions themselves, as just general characters, are built for kids ultimately. Just in the sense that I think that they're, manufactured for them in the same size. They're sort of in their own little world. They're kind of this community that's been marooned inside this other world, this adult world around them that they don't really understand, but they have their own language and they have their own way of kind of getting around it. And I guess I feel like there's a lot of kind of general silliness there that I think kids would really gravitate towards. So to me, it makes a lot of sense that they have a lot of popular fans. Did they make a good movie? That's debatable. There's a lot of.
We're here to debate just that. So I mean, so all that you said is that you understand why people like them. Did you? Yeah, I think. If you had to if you were weighing the pros and the cons, was there anything about this movie that you felt like, okay, there are a lot of things I didn't like, but this is something that I can take away from?
Well, it's not like I thought that there was anything too bad. For me, I guess, there were definitely some funny jokes. There were some funny sight gags. There was some level of reference that I appreciated. Although sometimes I felt it was too heavy-handed. I appreciated some of the performances.
I can see that.
I liked Sandra Bullock on occasion. I kind of didn't like her on occasion. There was there's a lot of things that were kind of in between for me, and I think that's why I'm struggling to try to pick out one specific thing.
I agree with you about Sandra Bullock. I mean, I feel like she had some moments, and I feel like there were moments that were over and didn't seem to work. This is her character here, And yeah, no, I'm with you on this. I did not feel compared to some of the other voice actors, I did not feel that she had a really good contribution to this film, and I'm not sure that the script helped her out any. You know what I mean? With voice acting, it's hard to tell, but yeah. I mean, overall, the character design I feel left something to be desired. The overall character concept, I want to say, I wanted her to be more clever, just overall. I mean, not scary, but I mean, certainly we've seen better, stronger villains in other animated films. Sorry, Jay Money, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say that I think that's absolutely true, and also, in general, for me, I think the side characters, and specifically the human side characters, are the ones that made this film feel kind of clunky to me. Okay, I just think that there wasn't much they could add.
I had two that I really liked, and that is I really like John Hamm as Overkill's husband, and I really like Michael Keaton as the sort of villain but family dad man. Those are the two, like when those characters were on screen, and again, in anime films, I feel like it's hard to distinguish, like the work from, except in things like Aladdin, where it's clearly Robin Williams,
Sure.
dominating that movie. I mean, I think it's hard to distinguish, from the character concept versus like the actual voice work. But I enjoyed those characters, and the design team that worked on those characters felt more more cohesive than some of the other characters that were introduced. Davy Joe, where are you on this stuff?
To touch on Sandra Bullock, I thought she was great, but she didn't have a whole lot to work with. It kind of reminds me of our Hot Pursuit conversation. She didn't. There wasn't a lot written for her that was great. She was, I thought, kind of a really watered down Yosemite Sam, with she had the gadgets and stuff. But I don't know. I mean, that's part of that's really what kind of brings the movie down a bit. Is it's just kind of it's silliness, and it did make me laugh from time to time. So I can't really.
Do you guys have specific gags that you remember that you want to toss out? Like, is it's just things that did make you laugh?
Yeah, the moon landing thing got me. I laughed out loud when they show them shooting the moon landing in the studio there. That's the one thing that really. And
one of those intertextual moments that one of those details that was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jay, did you have a moment that you liked?
There was a scene they did that I think probably was a direct reference to the Rascals, where they have three of them stacked up in an overcoat, which is a joke that we've seen numerous times before. But because of the anatomy of the minions themselves and the way that they were sort of placed in there was an ongoing sort of sight gag that happened out of the blue that I thought was actually kind of funny. I think there was the way that they handled it, which I appreciated, because it was at least doing something a little bit different within that sort of mix, that sort of trope that we've seen before. But in general, it's funny because Davy Joe starts off this conversation by saying he thought it was very cartoony. My issue with the movie is that I didn't think it was cartoony. I walked into this thinking there'd be a lot more sight gags, knowing that they don't actually speak language. And so I was hoping that this movie in general would have a lot more just visual humor and a lot more kind of physical humor in a sense for this movie, because I knew that
almost directly connected to almost directly connected to our last classic, The Great Dictator.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of was hoping that there'd be a lot more of that in there, because I knew that they couldn't rely on the script for jokes. And then lo and behold, they decided to rely on the script for jokes. And in that sense, I thought that was way too much gibberish talking, because you can only hear them like sing one song in gibberish before you're kind of tired of the idea of it.
But people really enjoy that about these characters. So I mean, like I felt like it was shoved down our throat. But I mean, the person I went with, that was her favorite part.
Was that? I mean, I guess I understand why kids might respond to it, but for me, it got tiring quick. And it's funny because the trailer, I actually liked the trailer because I hoped that the movie was going to be more like the entire trailer. I would have loved to have seen the minions through history, fumbling their way through history in almost in a weird chaotic way.
I had the same thought. And my last note here, sort of jumping the gun, is I feel like the saddest thing of all is that the concept had so much potential. I mean, like, I'm not, I don't think any of us are really generally excited to see animated films, but I think this one I thought had a lot of potential given that concept of I mean, my enjoyment of historical fiction combined with the cleverness of the trailer, I thought there might be something there. And it just sort of fizzled in that sense. It had its moments, but it certainly didn't live up to that potential. Which leads, I think, to my main issue, like the overarching issue with it, that may not that seems nitpicky, but in terms of from a storytelling point of view, I think it's really, really important. And that it's something that when you're writing things, you call it a wholeness of world. And I guess within the context of this film, it's consistent. But in the context of the franchise, it isn't, because the way they're set up in the first two Despicable Me films,
Hmm.
There are these little creatures that live in the basement, and that they, are sort of, they didn't have names in the first film. They started to get some names in the second film, and all of a sudden, this third film, if you want to call it a third film, they have whole personalities, but they were sort of nameless, behind-the-scenes type characters. And they had little like bumbling things that they did for Gru in the first couple films. They actually played a pretty big part in the second film, but here they changed the course of natural history in this film, and
Right.
that seems to really belie the concept of the characters to begin with. And I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, like, at what point one of the characters becomes the King of England, and I think that is so far afield from how these characters were established, and I feel like it's a cheat. I feel like it's I feel like it's poor writing. I mean, like, I understand it's a standalone film, but at the same time, if you guys were watching TV shows, like, let's say you guys are House of Cards fans, and Frank Underwood all of a sudden joined the Hare Krishna, or something like something that just didn't fit. This is a series of films, and they need to stay consistent with one another, and it bothered me throughout. I mean, like, I like that sequence that we talked about earlier. When there was a montage of going through history where they, messed with the dinosaur, messed with the pyramids, and those were enjoyable moments. And in all those moments, they were like they affected history, but in a very behind-the-scenes way that seems to fit with what these characters were.
Right.
But I mean, like, the rest of the plot, just didn't at all. And it was, I mean, like, how are these minions not remembered 20 years later when Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2 take place? I mean, I have a real problem with that.
Yeah, and I guess I wonder if they did that in some ways because they really are trying to build, I think, a secondary franchise out of this. I mean, it did very well at the box office. I have to assume they might try for a sequel at this point.
Oh, no question.
Well, and that's another kind of stupid thing, is I feel like by the meeting Gru at the end the way they did. Sorry, I guess that was a big spoiler, but I mean, you knew. It's not like you didn't know they were eventually going to meet Gru.
That's not a spoiler.
But I mean, like, I feel like they sort of closed that circle in a way, in a way that sort of,
well, except
bites themselves into a corner.
Maybe, but now that they actually have kind of stars of the group, now that there are sort of identifiable characters that are almost leader-esque in their way, you can have side adventures with the minions now, the same way that you have side adventures with the Penguins of Madagascar, for instance. It's like you now have this separate contained group that does develop its own identity.
The Penguins of Madagascar were always sort of independent, of those main characters.
Yeah, but I mean, but just to be clear, I mean, like with Despicable Me stuff, the minions, they show up on occasion in very funny ways because they're often there for the foil, but you don't know what they're doing the other, hour and a half of the movie, right? So there are plenty of opportunities, I think, for them to actually have another kind of, storyline grow out of the side adventures. In fact, I think that would actually be really funny if they had, I'm just thinking right now, like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern-esque kind of, approach to doing Despicable Me, where we had this entire movie driven by the minions from that movie, and you only see the stuff that happened in Despicable Me on the sidelines. So it almost kind of ties them together and shows their side of the story. I just think in general what they're trying to do is make them into another big figurehead for this franchise, one way or the other. So I guess I see why they did that, but I mean, I absolutely agree with you, JB. It didn't make sense to me for them to be in that situation, and it felt disjointed with the rest of what was happening with the film. And I wasn't interested in that plot line ultimately. I just thought it was kind of going off in a weird direction. And also, just because you already spoiled it, I felt like the thing with them connecting it to Despicable Me, with them finding Gru at the end, was very, very tacked on. And that kind of annoyed me a little bit too. But,
And I mean, like, it wasn't necessary. I was, because, we're savvy like this, I was expecting them not to, for the very reasons that you talked about.
Yeah.
So when they did, it felt forced and also stupid. From if they want to build a franchise, I felt like, why close that loop?
Yeah.
So now this becomes the obvious question. I mean, this is our 13th episode. I can't believe we're here, but out of our 13, this is our second animated film. So what photo is this? All right, well, forget. It's time to compare. What do you guys, home versus Minions?
I'm going to throw this one to Davy Joe.
Minions. I think that
they're almost shaped the same. You think that Jeffrey Katzenberg had sort of one of his like part of it that had something to do with him choosing that book is to sort of like attack the minions like the way he did attack Bug's Life with ants. Do you think there was some sort of like secret, like hitting them off with the pass type strategy?
That certainly could be.
I certainly didn't realize until I pulled this photo up how similar they look, at least in shape, pillow shape.
I like the designs and the look of Home better, but I thought Minions was better overall.
Just maybe slightly more clever.
Yeah, it was a little fun. It was definitely a lot funnier, which to me is kind of important. It definitely, I don't know, it felt quicker. Whether or not it really was, I don't know. Home looked good though. Home probably was a better look.
A lot of creativity in Home, innovative ideas in terms of the visual structure. The other thing about it is Home was really poorly damaged by voice work of Jim Parsons and Rihanna, who were like flat out bad and didn't sound right. I mean, Sandra Bullock, didn't have a good script, but she didn't like ever sound like she wasn't right for the part necessarily. Her lines weren't that interesting.
Yeah.
She did everything she could with what she had.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, like the audience doesn't know this, and maybe you guys aren't. I'm a huge Sandra Bullock fan, so I've supported. You guys do know this from my top 5 last week. How much I chirped about while you were sleeping. So.
Oh yes.
I'm definitely in her corner, and I am one to give her the benefit of the doubt more often than not. But yeah, I with you, like certainly inconsistencies in this particular characterization. All right, closing. I mean, I don't have anything else. I don't know if you guys do about Minions.
No, that covers it. I think for me.
No.
Maybe Joe.
It was a good time at the movies. That's about it.
You're just trying to be the nice guy.
Comes so naturally.
I mean, it wasn't very good a time at the movies, unless you got laid after. Comments?
If you got laid after showing up Minions, there's something going on with Davie Joe that we don't like.
I don't know. He's a smooth character. But not only that, I mean, like, did you go with your grandma, Davie Joe? What's going on in that new house you have behind you there in Charlotte? What's that new apartment all about? Who designed your house there?
I don't know.
Are there doilies somewhere in that room? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, we gotta find the doilies.
Anyway, moving on. Let's. What else we got?
All right. So coming up in about 7 minutes is going to be our Indie Spotlight. We're going to close this show and we're going to start a new show coming up at 7 minutes. It's 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. And our Indie for tonight is this movie called Land Ho. Land Ho is our movie. You'll see. And that's the timer to say that we've got to move on. I should stop it. So Land Ho is our indie coming up in just a few minutes, and our next show for discussion is going to be Southpaw. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the night. Our next current release is coming up on July 24th, which is next.
Wait.
No, July 28th. Sorry.
28th, yeah.
Tuesday, July 28th. And that's going to be, we're going to talk about Southpaw. It's coming up in about 8 days. In the meantime, hopefully we'll see you now in 6 minutes. We're going to talk about the indie Land Ho. It'll be an interesting discussion, I think. Check it out. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.